From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
Brendan Wenzel is an illustrator based in Brooklyn. He is a graduate of Pratt Institute. His books include Some Pets, Some Bugs, One Day in the Eucalyptus Tree, and Beastly Babies. His latest book is They All Saw a Cat, which he wrote and illustrated. What a creative and visually appealing way to remind us that we each see the same world in different ways. All of the images are wonderful, so it's hard for me to pick just one, but I think my favorite is the bee. So if you haven't read the book, be sure you check it out. For those of you familiar with Brendan's work, which shows a clear love for the natural world, you will not be surprised to learn that he is a committed conservationist interested in preserving threatened places and species, especially in Southeast Asia. After his remarks, Brendan will be signing in book signing line 18, which is down to your right, starting at 12:30. And with that, I would like to introduce Brendan Wenzel.
Hey, is my mic on? Can everybody hear me? How are you? Let me just get situated. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you, National Book Festival, for having me. All right, I've got one of these. Let's see. I'm gonna test drive. Let's see. Is it working? Well, this is a strong start. Let me see. Hold on. Okay. Okay. Hello, everybody. So, before I begin, I have a couple of cat-related questions. How many people here have a pet cat? Okay, not that many, actually. How many people have seen a cat? Maybe in their building, at a friend's house, have had some kind of relationship with a cat. Okay, wonderful. So, here's where things get a little bit more interesting. How many people here think that cats are cute? How many people think that cats are kind of creepy? Slinking around, a little mysterious, yeah? How many people think that cats are boring? And how many people think that cats are really interesting? Okay, so this is cool. We have, many people in this audience, but everyone raised their hands for different questions, which means that we all have had very different, unique experiences with cats, which means that when we see cats, we're all seeing them in different ways. And so this was something that I thought was really, really interesting. And so I wrote this book called They All Saw a Cat about this idea and about how different people and different animals see cats in very, very different ways. So before I talk about that, I'd like to tell you a little bit about myself and about why I make books. So the first thing to understand is that I have loved animals since I was about this big. This is a picture of me at the Bronx Zoo in New York City, probably at the age of 10 or 11. And it was my favorite place at the time and still really is my favorite place. And surrounding this photograph, you can see all the magazines and books that I loved at that time period. So National Geographic and The Animals of Maple Hill Farm by the Provinsons and The Tales of Uncle Remus, illustrated by Jerry Pinkney, who's still one of my favorite illustrators. And so when I started writing and illustrating stories, they were, of course, about animals. So this is my first book, and it was called The Frog, and it was all about frogs and the life cycle of frogs. And my second book was called Land of the Little, and it was all about baby animals. And funnily enough, when I was published, my second book that I illustrated was also about baby animals. You may not have heard of this because at that point I was writing under the name B.S. Wenzel instead of Brendan Wenzel. When I got to art school, I also drew animals. This is a piece from my senior project at Pratt. And a friend of mine tried to imagine the zoo of the future if we had traveled to other planets and brought animals back. So this was called the Fantastical Intergalactical Zoo. A couple years out of art school, I was doing nothing that had anything to do with animals. Both my wife, Magdalena, and I were working in office buildings. And my only interaction with anything that had anything to do with the natural world was coming home at night and watching these wonderful BBC wildlife documentaries by David Attenborough, which I was just consuming ravenously. So at one point I said to my wife, we've got to get out of here. And she said, yeah, we do. Let's go see some actual animals. And so we devised this plan. If we could get to the other side of the world, a place like Melbourne, Australia, then essentially everywhere else would more or less be on the way home. And so we did. We left the US, and for a number of magical years, I found myself crossing paths with all these really cool creatures I'd been learning about in these nature documentaries. So the last shot was a Kia, which is a parrot in New Zealand. This is a troop of macaques grooming my wife in Bali. These are some wallabies. This is a vine snake on my arm, and I am making this face because I found out that this vine snake is just mildly poisonous, which I was thrilled to realize. And everywhere we've traveled, I always draw. And so I draw with everything I can get my hands on. I draw with pencils. I draw with markers. I paint with watercolors, which come with me everywhere I go. And I get to draw in all kinds of cool places like Christchurch, New Zealand, or Ubud, Bali, or Tokyo, Japan, or on the streets of Ho Chi Minh City. And it was in Ho Chi Minh City in Vietnam that my wife and I were having such a great time that we decided to stay for 2 years. And so we spent 2 years living in this really wonderful city on the other side of the world. And spending time in a place that was so different from the country that we grew up was wonderful for so many reasons. But one of the greatest things was seeing how just day-to-day life in Vietnam challenged us in a great way to reimagine our relationships to everything that we found that were at one time familiar. So things like architecture and etiquette and fashion and language all needed to be reimagined. And we had this great opportunity to step outside ourselves and see the world from an entirely different point of view. And at the time I said, this is so, I was expanding and I felt like it was so valuable, but I wasn't quite sure how to explore that in a book. What I did know how to do at the time was continue to draw animals. So these are images of gibbons that I created in Thailand. And so I sketched animals everywhere we went. And just like in the picture book world, sketches became finals. And they eventually turned into this series, which was created to illustrate both more common but also lesser known creatures of Southeast Asia. And I did this, one, because I was fascinated by these creatures, but also because I wanted to educate myself about all the different and new animals that I would find in the steamy ecosystems around our new home. This really wonderful thing happened when I put these images out into the world. They very quickly began to connect me to people who also felt the same way about these creatures, who were fascinated by them. And those were conservationists and biologists. And I was thrilled to find out that they felt like there were plenty of places that we could collaborate and explore this enthusiasm together. So this is a map that I worked on with the Sam Visna Center in Cambodia, and I also worked on it with the Wildlife Conservation Society, who has branches all over the world. And this map was created to highlight some of the less traveled areas in Cambodia that are ecological hotspots. And what we were hoping is that maybe by creating a map like this, we could attract tourist dollars to some of the roads less traveled. Through a project like this, I was able to connect with the Wildlife Conservation Society back home in the States. And in 2015, I was able to work on a redesign of the Bronx Children's Zoo with some of my heroes from my childhood, which was really, really fantastic and overwhelming. I think that one of the questions that I confront again and again, being someone who is passionate about both the arts and conservation, is finding ways to share my enthusiasm and my fascination with the natural world with a wider audience. And it's one of the reasons that I feel very grateful that I get to work in picture books. Because I feel like picture books are just the absolute perfect platform for diving into some of these ideas in an interesting and expansive way. And so working in picture books, I've been able to collaborate with all these fantastic authors like Angela Dieter-Lizzie and Ellen Jackson and Daniel Bernstrom, and I've been able to get a glance at how they see the natural world and what inspires them about animals and natural systems. Just getting through here, apologies. Sorry, it seems we're caught up here. Okay. Other authors are not the only people whose viewpoints that I'm interested in, though. And one of the great things about working in picture books is I've had the chance to meet and work with lots of kids. So these pictures are from an art class that I taught in Nepal, and you can kind of see these fish tanks in the picture. And essentially, these art classes were held around these tanks that were full of frogs and insects and all these other animals that we found around this beautiful valley in Nepal. One thing that I've heard again and again in art class, both in the States and abroad, is a lot of kids saying, "I've done a bad drawing." I don't know if anybody has ever said this or ever felt this way, and it's certainly something that I've felt a number of times. But my philosophy is that doing a bad drawing is really an impossible idea, and every chance I get, I try to share this with kids. Because I think that when you're doing a drawing, even if it's a drawing where you feel like you've made a mistake or you've not done everything exactly the way you wanted to do it, what you're ultimately doing is sharing your point of view or sharing your perspective with an audience, with the outside world. And so what you're doing for them is giving them a chance to see something like a frog in a new and interesting way that maybe they haven't thought about it before. And so kind of adopting that line of thinking, a bad drawing becomes an absolute impossibility. And I really like this idea, and I think it's very important. And it's something that I wanted to write about, and I wasn't quite sure how to approach it. So a couple years ago, Magdalena and I returned from living abroad. We had lived in Vietnam, and we'd spent time also in Nepal. And I set up this little studio and started pacing back and forth and thinking about what I wanted to write about and what kind of story I wanted to tell. And so I thought about animals that I'd seen, and I thought about animals that had seen me, and I thought about animals that had chased me, and I thought about animals who I'd loved, like my cat Show Cat in Vietnam, and I thought about people that I'd met, and I thought about art that I'd seen, and I thought about art that I'd made with people that I had met. And then I was doing a lot of thinking, so I started thinking about getting a snack, and so I walked down to my kitchen, and then I started thinking about the mouse that lives in my kitchen because it had been using my pantry as a restroom. And so I started thinking about getting a cat, like my parents, because my parents certainly do not have a mouse problem. But then I started thinking about being in Nepal and walking through tiger habitat on foot and how vulnerable that made me feel. And I thought, well, maybe I feel a similar way about a tiger that a mouse feels about a cat. And then I realized that's not exactly right, because a tiger usually wants to eat deer, where a cat very much wants to eat mice all of the time. And so I went back to my studio and I started thinking again, which is always dangerous. But eventually I wrote down this line, and that line was, the mice saw a cat and the cat was a frightening cat. And I thought it was a little bit clunky. So I did what an illustrator does, and I drew a picture. And so I drew this picture of all these little mice, and they're running away from this big kind of terrifying cat. And then I said, okay, now I'm going to try my hand at writing this again. And this time I said, okay, let's keep it to just one mouse. We'll have it about the experience between this one animal and this cat. And then I thought, well, the frightening cat, I mean, that is clearly an image of a very, very frightening cat. And so I scratched that out as well, and then went back to the drawing board. And I ended up with this. And I really liked it. I said, oh, this is, the text and the image are interacting in exactly the way that I was kind of hoping for. And I took a step back and started thinking about all the other animals that might see this cat, and how every animal that would perceive this cat would see it in their own way. And as I started to kind of take on the character of this cat, or as these animals, and open up my art bin, I went, oh, like a flea is not going to want to use the same materials as a bee, where a flea might want to use something like colored pencil to communicate that cat. Maybe a bee with its compound eyes would sort of use watercolor. And maybe a snake, sensing heat, would want to use acrylic and loose crayon. And so I had just a blast for 6 months reading as much as I could every night about each of these animals, and then waking up the next day and kind of adopting this character, and then just trying to create art as a snake, as a skunk. So the result is this book, They All Saw a Cat. And I think if I have time, maybe I'll have some kids come up and we can read it together. Would anybody like to come up on stage and we can read the book? Let me just grab the book really quickly. Come on up, guys. How are you? Nice to meet you. You guys want to sit down here and we'll read the book together? All right. I'm going to sit. Oh, can I sit in this chair so I just face outward and then? All right. And then you guys want to come right in here? Can we sit on the floor? All right. Wonderful. Look at this. How's everybody doing? Good. Thank you for coming up. All right. So, this is my book. All right. So this book is called They All Saw a Cat. These are the end papers. All right. So as we flip through the book, I'm hoping that everybody can keep their eyes on this collar and on this bell. All right, we all see that? We've got a red collar and a bell. All right. So the cat walked through the world with its whiskers, ears, and paws. Here we have this cat, right? Just walking through the world. And the child saw a cat. And so we see this cat, and it's a very, very cute cat, right? It's fuzzy and it's friendly. Oh, we don't have that anymore. And the dog saw a cat. What's happening to the cat? Yeah, he's looking a little bit creepier here, huh? And the fox saw a cat. Yes, they all saw the cat. The cat walked through the world with its whiskers, ears, and paws. And the fish saw a cat. And the mouse saw a cat. Where's the mouse? It's right down here. And the bee saw a cat. Yes, they all saw the cat. Can you guys imagine what it's like to be a bee? Bzzz, exactly. The cat walked through the world with its whiskers, ears, and paws. And the bird saw a cat up above the clouds. And there are 5 animals hiding in this page. Can anybody see one of the animals? We'll just do one. There we go. Can anybody find the bird eggs? There's a bird egg somewhere in here. There you go. There they are. Wonderful. And the flea saw a cat. And the snake saw a cat. And the skunk saw a cat. And the worm saw a cat. And the bat saw a cat. Yes, they all saw the cat. Yes, they all saw a cat. And what's happening here? This cat is made up of all the different ways that we've seen that cat throughout the book. A child and a dog and a fox and a fish, and a mouse and a bee and a bird and a flea, and a snake and a skunk and a worm and a bat. The cat knew them all, And they all knew the cat. And the cat walked through the world with its whiskers, ears, and paws. Then it came to the water. And imagine what it saw. What's it see? All right. So, like I said before, to make this book, every day I woke up and I imagined I was a different animal. So what I'm hoping is that maybe you guys want to imagine that you're an animal with me right now. Do you guys want to do that? All right, cool. So let's come, well, you guys can sit here and I'm going to go over to this drawing board. And what we're going to do is we're going to imagine that we're transforming into bats. Oh, you guys can sit right here. You can sit right here. Can you see me from over here? All right. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw on this board, and we're going to turn into bats together. And I'll tell you how to do that. And so as I draw, I'm going to transform a kid into a bat. But what I want you guys to do is imagine that you're transforming just like that kid into a bat, and we're going to become bats. Does that sound fun? All right, so we're going to start. Oh, excuse me, sorry about that. All right, so we're going to start with a kid. Here we go. So we got our body, right? We've got a body. Do a head. Got some eyes, right? What's here? What are these? Arms, there we go, all right. What comes at the end of arms? Fingers, right, 5 fingers. And then down here, feet. Okay. So we've got our human child. Now, let's start with our body. So human beings have a smooth body, right? But bats are covered in something and it keeps them warm at night when they fly around. Does anyone know what it is? What is it? It's fur. All right, so I'm going to draw some fur over here, and what I want you guys to do is imagine growing furry fur all over you, okay? And this is going to, and for a bat, this is going to keep you warm because you're flying around and it's cold at night, right? And it's going to get cold in that cave where you're probably sleeping all day. All right. So now we've got our bat fur. Is everybody growing bat fur? Yeah? Yeah, there you go. All right. All right, now let's go to our legs. All right, so we've got these long people legs, but we're not going to need those long legs as a bat, right? We're going to need little tiny legs, but what we're going to need is long, long toes so we can hang on to that branch. So I'm going to draw little bat legs, and everyone's imagining their legs shrinking down and those toes getting really long. All right, here we go. Everybody growing bat legs? All right. Yeah? All right. And then we'll do a little bat tail. All right. Now, does a bat have arms? What does a bat have? Wings, that's right. So this is the fun part. So I want everybody to imagine growing big, long bat wings. Ready? Those fingers are stretching out and becoming really big bat wings. How you guys doing? You growing those wings? You flapping around? Everybody flapping? There we go. All right. And then we've got one last adjustment to make. And that's up here, because we've got our ears on our side of the head. And where are the bat's ears? Where does the bat have ears? Up here on the top, right? All right, so let's give some big, big bat ears. Wow, all right. That's a bat. All right, and then the last step is now that we're bats, we've got to shrink way, 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 way down so we become tiny little bats. All right, now, here is your mission. Now you have to go home today as bats, okay? And when you get home, I want you to think, how do I see the world? How am I gonna see the world around me? And what you can do is if you go, I don't know anything about bats, maybe you can go to the library, you can read as much as you can about how those bats see the world, and then you can make a piece of artwork as a bat. And you guys all might want to make a piece of artwork as a bat with different materials. You might see it to see the world in entirely different ways. Does that make sense? Does that sound fun? And so what I'm hoping is that when you read this book, when you read They All Saw a Cat, you can go through and imagine how every one of those animals sees the world And maybe you'll look at how I think these animals see the world and go, I don't think that was right at all. I think animals see the world like this. I think animals see the world like that. And that's my greatest hope for this book, is that you guys will take it back and have lots and lots of questions about the book and the world and about how different things see this one cat. So anyway, thank you so much for coming and listening.
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.